So within our organization, there's a constant and ongoing debate, and some would call it a battle, over what we should be spending on our marketing and advertising efforts. It seems there's never enough money that's allocated in the budget to achieve all of the objectives that have been set for that budget. If this sounds familiar to you, then you're in the right place today, because that's what we're going to talk about. I'm Karina Keys, and this is Down at Digi, where we're getting down to the business of digital marketing. Thanks for joining us today. So overall, let's talk about the budget. Specifically, how do we determine what is a good budget for my organization? So how you determine that has some variables into it, and there really is no right or wrong answer. If your business is growing and you're super successful without having to spend any money in marketing, fantastic, congratulations, you're in a great place, keep doing what you're doing. But most of us are not in that similar position. So there's a few variables that we need to look at when we talk about how to determine our marketing budget. And the number one is just to start with our overall revenue. Like, how much money does our organization generate in a given calendar year? And if you need to meet with your CFO or talk to maybe your director of operations, but really know what that number is before we get started. The second aspect of that is the age of your organization. If you're a young organization, meaning you're less than 5 years old, you're going to have to spend more money in marketing because you need to create the brand awareness and let people know about your product and your services that you offer. You don't benefit from having a good brand recognition going into the marketplace. So based on a study that was conducted in 2020, the average new business or young business was spending somewhere between 12 and 20% of their total revenue in marketing and advertising efforts. Now, that included everything from consultants and time from their team, as well as, developing content for the website and website development. So that's a pretty broad range of things that's included in that. But we know that the average of that time or of that investment is somewhere between 12 and 20%. It may feel like a lot for you as you're getting started, especially young organization where budget is tight. But you can adjust your fees or your prices in order to accommodate that and build it into your expenses, just like you would build in the cost of salaries or overhead into how you're pricing your products. Word of mouth really can go a long way with helping you also build your budget, but that takes time and should also be allocated into that 12 to 20% because there is an investment of time that goes into that. Follow-up, phone calls, meetings, networking, all is built into that budget, and it's a really critical component to be able to incorporate in there. Established brands have it slightly better off. They don't need to invest quite as much money into their marketing efforts. And a recent CMO study showed that established businesses spend somewhere between 6.5% to 12% of their total budget into marketing and advertising efforts. And there's a lot of variables that go into that. It's your industry and the industry that you're in. It's impacted by the size of your organization and also your growth goals. But we also want to acknowledge that what we're looking at in 2021 is very different than what we were looking at in 2019. We know that those numbers came from that 12 to 20% or that 6.5% to 12% really was a pre-pandemic number. So this study was again done in June of 2020 to key executives and marketing officers to see how did the pandemic affect the budgets that they were putting into marketing. And I don't think it was a surprise that most organizations increased their budgets pretty significantly. Prior to the pandemic, established businesses were averaging about 8.5% to 9% of their budget going into marketing and advertising efforts. Once they were in the pandemic, those numbers increased to almost 11.6%. So we had to adjust with the times, we had to adjust with the situation that we were dealt with. And I would foresee that those numbers will probably maintain that for a short while and then start going back down to what they were pre-pandemic. It also varies based on your industry. So we know not every industry is created equal in every industry, whether it's a business to consumer marketing or business to business marketing, really also impacts the budget that you need to allocate to your marketing and advertising. So we've got some resources. We're gonna have a blog that's gonna detail this a little bit more. But for example, when we look at consumer services, they average almost 19% of all revenue generated goes back into marketing and advertising efforts. Now, you compare that to financial services or the education market, and they're roughly 9%, which is pretty in line with what that overall average was. But manufacturing, they only average about 3% of their total revenues goes back into marketing and advertising efforts. We do have a calculator that is created. It's on our website. It will be available to you to utilize. You can go there. We'll have a link in the comments below. But go in there and kind of play with the numbers a little bit. This is information, we're not recording it, we're not saving it. You don't have to tell us who you are to be able to use it. We just want to make that as a resource to you, that you can go in and plug in your revenue numbers, plug in your industry, and it's going to give you some ballpark numbers of what should be invested into overall marketing and advertising, and what percentage of that should be spent in digital. I hope that's a good resource for you. Thanks for joining us today for Down in Digi. I hope you know more than you did 5 minutes ago. Have a great day.